Hey, friends, welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I'm your host, Jamie Vaughn, and I am super excited to have my new pink sister that I've met. She ran across my podcast, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Her name is Jennifer Burgoyne, and Jennifer is the mother of 4 adult children and wife to John. She and her husband raised their children in the New Jersey suburbs. And during COVID, they impulsively decided to sell it all and move back to where it began for them 35 years earlier to, Hoboken, New Jersey?
Yeah.
Hoboken. They swapped their suburban spread for an apartment, got rid of the extra cars and furniture, and now thoroughly enjoy their downsized empty nest lives in the exurbs of New York City. She works part-time as a sales associate at Anthropology, and when not walking her dog, Belle, you can find her at yoga, Pilates, or simply riding her city bike around town. Oh, it's called City Bike. Nice. I want to do that. She and John love to travel and enjoy spending time with their large, extended families. Hi, Jennifer. What a fun life you have. I'm excited for your downsized life.
I love
That must
it.
feel great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm almost 6 weeks out from my reconstruction surgery. And each week that goes by, my body is healing, better and better. So
Awesome. So good to hear. Well, you and I were having this conversation. You and I texted back and forth, emailed, messaged on Facebook. Can you tell our audience how you ran across me?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer back in September, and I just started listening, like finding breast cancer podcasts. I walk my dog a lot. I love listening to podcasts. So just by chance, I stumbled upon your podcast, and I started with your first season, listening. And then you had an episode where you were interviewing your DIEP flap surgeon. And at that point, I was on the fence about what type of reconstruction surgery I was going to do. And I listened to that podcast, and it changed my mind. And I was so grateful for the clarity, because I'd been going back and forth, and I came home and I found your information, and I sent you a text. I think I sent you a message on Facebook, or I found your Facebook, or, and I just said, thank you. Thank you so much. I needed to hear this. And ever since then, I've been your number one fan.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how much I appreciate your sharing that, because I remember when I was first diagnosed, I was, as you know, we're like in a world of what the F is going on here. I don't even, know up from down, and I was confused. I didn't even have surgery on my radar at that time. But luckily, I was led to the kind of surgery that the autologous surgery, where they use the tissue from your body to reconstruct your breasts. I was heading down, my audience knows that I was heading down the implant road, and which I have nothing against. I just personally didn't want them.
Yeah.
And so when I started this podcast last year, one of my biggest goals, missions, was to reach people like you and to help people make the decision and understand where the really awesome surgeons, and of course my Dr. Cabling is amazing. And so I'm just thrilled that this podcast reached you and you were able to make the decision that you did. And we're going to talk about your surgery that you ended up having. So I want to start off with, who was Jennifer before breast cancer? Because we all know that things change, and for a lot of times for the better, and because we have a lot of silver linings. But I always love to ask the question who the person was before breast cancer. So who was Jennifer?
Well, like my bio, my husband and our youngest child is finishing up her senior year in college. We just were so enjoying our empty nest life. I mean, after all the hard work of raising 4 children, and, my husband has his own business, and being a partner, and, um, you know, a sister, daughter, I sound like just life and relationships. And we were just enjoying being with each other. I got a part-time job at Anthropology. I'm the second oldest person in my store that works there. But I loved it. I was around all these young people that weren't my kids. And I mean, I love my kids, but that's who I was. And we were traveling more, just kind of enjoying our lives. So that's who I was. And, now I'm a lot different, but
Yeah. And then breast cancer hit you. It's kind of like when I retired, I was so excited to have the retired life. I found out 1 week after I retired, and my
yeah,
husband and I had all kinds of plans, and that changed very quickly.
yeah,
So yeah, it kind of just smacks you right upside the head, and reality sets in, right?
yes,
Um, I love, and hopefully you are getting back to the things that you wanted to do, and it just takes a little while. So what was your breast cancer diagnosis, and what were your treatments like?
Okay, so I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma. I had 2 tumors on my right breast, um, stage 1, grade 2. So they were relatively small. But the problem that was was explained to me, the normal course of treatment for what I have would be a lumpectomy plus radiation. But where my 2 tumors were located and the size of my breast, my surgeon felt that it would just, she said, I would have to take too much out of your breast, including the margins with the 2 spots. You're not going to be left with anything. And she said, my recommendation is to do a nipple sparing mastectomy. And so that's what I did. And and with that comes reconstruction. So she works with 2 plastic surgeons that are microsurgeons. And they offered me, when I went for my consultation, autologous reconstruction. So that's what they mainly do. That's their sort of thing. And then after that was implant-based reconstruction. So we talked about the pros and cons of both of those. But I was so emotionally vulnerable, I guess. I don't even know how to describe it, from getting the diagnosis. And then the next thing I know, a mastectomy and reconstruction and expanders and all this stuff, that I shut down. I said, I can't make this decision right now. And thankfully, my doctors were very patient with me. And they said, you know what? You don't have to do anything now. We can put an expander in. You can have the expander for a year. Just take your time and come to the decision that fits you the best. And I was grateful for that, because I think my fear-based reaction was to take it all out and then put it all back in, right? I mean, I just wanted me to be whole. I didn't want to lose my breast. And I didn't really ever kind of think about my breasts that much. I mean, I it wasn't until, I had the reality that I'm going to have it removed that I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want this to happen." I kind of, and my breasts have served me well. I breastfed all four of my children. I didn't care that they were small. I mean, I just kind of, they were just part of me. So I think, deep down, I just wanted to be whole again. I mean, that's really what I wanted. And as I said, it took me a while, to figure out what type of surgery would work the best for me and for what resonated most with who I was. And so I had a partial nipple sparing mastectomy in November, and they also took out my lymph nodes, and everything came back clear. And it was incredible because I went back to the surgeon and they took off my bandages, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I started to cry because my breast looked the same. I mean, it was flattened out a little, but it still was there. And I remember just being so happy, like so grateful that it wasn't mutilated and it was still there. And then as the weeks went on and I started healing from the mastectomy, I started to kind of come around in my thinking. And that's when I listened to your podcast with Dr. Cabling. And I thought to myself, you know what? I am really, first of all, very fortunate that I live in an area where this is offered. And secondly, that my doctors do it and I'm a candidate for it. And I just needed the time to come to that decision. And when when I spoke to my family, my husband and my sisters and, everybody was like, wow, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Very supportive of it. Um, so that's really what happened to me. So I had the mastectomy with the reconstruction or the first phase in November. And then on February 29th, on Leap Day, I had my reconstruction surgery, the autologous PAP flap. So that's my story. So I'm almost 6 weeks out from that, and I'm still recovering. But other than that, I'm feeling good. So
I
thank
love
you.
that. And you look really good too. You have a glow about you, and it's just shining through. And I just am so happy that it worked out that way, even though you had to go through all of that fear and anxiety and all of that. I want to walk back a little bit.
Okay.
How did you find, how, how did it come about that I mean, how, what
How
were
did
you like taking care of your breast health before? How did you find that breast cancer? What happened there?
So it was funny. I had actually missed my yearly gynecological. I missed my gynecological.
Gynecological. I know it's so hard to say. Oncological, gynecological, autologous.
Too many big words here. I missed my exam. It was supposed to be in May. And then, as I mentioned before, my youngest daughter was going back to college, and she's 21, or I think she turned 21. So we go to the same, I have three daughters. We all go to the same gynecologist. And she said to me, Mom, Dr. Kim wants to give me a whatever, a pap smear, or whatever. And she was really nervous about it. And I thought, you know what? I missed I missed my exam back in May. Why don't we go together? And, I can I'm not going to be in there in the room with you, but at least, I'll get my exam and, we can drive there together. So we did. And so my doctor gave me the script for the mammo. And I thought, I don't know, I was in doctor mode. So I just called and made an appointment. I got in. It was the end of the summer. A lot of people were on vacation. I got in right away. And I think it was like the day, maybe 2 days later, I'm having breakfast with my husband. It's early and my phone rings and I pick it up and it was the radiologist. And they said, you know what? Something, we found something on your right breast. We'd like you to come back and we're going to do a more in-depth mammogram and a sonogram. So I was like, okay. Now I do have dense breasts. So this has happened to me in the past. So I didn't really think anything of it. So I went back in and I did the sonogram and the other mammogram, and they told me to go wait, in the waiting room and, for a little bit so the radiologist can review. And I sat there, in 20 minutes, half an hour, and I'm just sitting there, on my phone. And finally they come out and they bring me into the little room and the radiologist is there. And I just knew that it wasn't good news. And so she said, it looks like, we don't know for sure, but it looks like you have breast cancer, but we'd like to do a core biopsy and find out for sure. And I was like, okay. And then she's like, can you come back tomorrow? And I was like, okay. So I go back and they did the core biopsy in the two areas. And my husband and I were actually leaving for a vacation a few days later, and we were going to Europe. And I was really, I've never had a breast biopsy or anything. And I was kind of freaking out. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, they had the big needle and, and then they were shooting, I don't know, zinc or I don't know, the titanium in my breast. And the girl and one of the nurses like, don't worry, you'll be able to get through, the security at the airport. And I'm thinking, like, oh my gosh, like what the hell is going on? So, I go home and I remember I said to my husband, I'm like, this isn't good. I said, there was nothing, like no one was laughing in that room. No one was like, oh, it's just a cyst that we found and it looks benign. I mean, there was none of that. So then my OB, my gynecologist called me and, she said, I'm so sorry, Jen, that you're going through this. And I said, me too, but I'm going on vacation. Like what should we do? And she's like, just go on vacation and whatever it is, we'll deal with it when you get home. So of course, we're away for almost 2 weeks. And the night before we were due to come back, my phone just starts blowing up. And, when you're like, it was all these weird numbers from like Romania. I'm like, what is this? And I clicked on my messages and I saw it was the radiologist, and they had put the report in my patient portal. And of course, I clicked on it. I mean, I knew that I couldn't do any, obviously I couldn't do anything about it. And we were on our, we had a long journey home, and I read it and I saw carcinoma and grade stage 1. I had stage 1, grade 2, 2 spots. So I knew, and I kind of, it wasn't a shock. I mean, it wasn't a shock in the sense that I knew, I suspected that it was cancer and they were pretty upfront with me about it. But I was like, the shock was yet to come. I guess that's, the reality hadn't set in. And considering that I'm 57 years old, I've got 3 sisters, my mom's still alive. I have friends that have had breast cancer. I knew nothing about breast cancer. I thought when you had breast cancer, they were in both the breasts. I thought you had to have a mastectomy or chemotherapy, or I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about breast cancer. So when I, went to, when I went to the breast surgeon for a consultation, it was like learning a new language. She basically had a chart and was like, this is what you have: ER positive, PR positive, HER2 negative,
Mhm.
little picture of the what plus plus and minus. All these things that I was like, what? Hormonal receptive? I really knew absolutely nothing. And so it was a huge shock, and a big learning curve. And I don't think I really woke up. I don't think it really sunk in, my diagnosis, until I had the mastectomy. I think I was just completely in this like alternative universe of breast cancer. I kind of went through my day and I did what I had to do, but I was completely like sucked in to breast cancer land, and as we talked about this before, like learning a new language.
Mhm.
Literally had to learn a new language. And it was funny. And there are kind of funny things that come out of this journey, but I had an old friend that was diagnosed around the same time I was. And people had put us together because, and so we kind of rekindled our friendship over this. But we would laugh, we would talk on the phone, and we would laugh so hard. And she'd say to me, how do we pronounce this AI thing? Like aromatase inhibitor, like AI. And we were like, oh my gosh, there should be like a breast cancer for dummies podcast. Like, how do you pronounce all these new words that we're learning and all these symbols and what they mean? And she said, is it her too negative, or is it, she's like, I can see it, but how do we say that? And so that was a little, there have been little bright spots in this journey, and that was one of them. But yeah, so that's really my story. And then once I decided to do the autologous reconstruction, so I was not a candidate for the DIEP flap because of my abdominal tissue. So I had to go and get the MRA, that special MRI. And from that, they determined that they could do the PAP flap. And that's what I did. So they took the skin and the tissue from my inner thigh, and then they recreated my breast with that.
It's amazing what they can do.
Amazing.
You talked about how you had missed your mammogram, or it was delayed or whatever. One of the reasons I started this podcast last year was because early detection is incredibly important. You didn't have to go through chemotherapy. You caught it real early. Is that?
Well, they tested. So my oncotype,
Oh, yeah.
so
Yes.
we did an oncotype, and my one tumor so the cutoff was 25. So if it was
Okay.
25 and over, chemotherapy would help me. I came in right under. It was 23 on one tumor and 16 on the other tumor. So that negated the chemotherapy. And they weren't sure about if there was a lymph node involvement. So there was a possibility after the mastectomy that I would have had to I would have had to have radiation with my
Right.
lymph nodes. And they weren't, as I said, they didn't think I would have to from my MRI, but they weren't, they're not 100% until they actually
Mhm.
go in there, take them
Mhm.
out, send them out. So those came back. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate. So those came back clear.
That's pretty similar to mine. They didn't know if I would have had to have radiation until after the surgery. Turned out I didn't. All my lymph nodes and margins were all clear, which was nice. Had you waited to get your mammogram, it would have been a different story.
I think so. Oh, had I skipped a year, because I
Yeah.
mean, that's really where the direction that I was going. I was like, oh, I'll just do it next year. I mean, and I've had years in the past. I mean, I think during COVID, I think I skipped a year. Um, as I said, I never intellectually ever believed that I would ever get breast cancer, which is so
Right.
ridiculous. I mean,
I always thought other people got breast cancer.
me too. And I was like, well,
Even though I knew I had had lumpectomies in the past that were benign, even though I knew that the statistics, I knew what my friend's doctor said about it's not a matter of if you're going to get breast cancer, it's when, right? Even though I knew that in the back of my mind, I was like, I go in every year, I check them. It's what happens to other people.
yes,
Yeah.
I know, me too. I mean, and I was a little, I mean, I was, I was like, I breastfed all those little fuckers. I like 4 kids and for like at least a year. And I thought, I'm protected. One
Yeah.
of because I used to go to, La Leche League meetings and they always used to say, like, oh, breastfeeding. I mean, if you breastfeed, it protects you from breast cancer. So that like stuck in my head and I'm very arrogant, but I just kind of believe that. I
Yeah.
really did.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of myths. Like for example, like soy gives you breast cancer. It does not. That
Right.
is like a total myth, and I believed it for years. I stopped eating any soy, um, and then I was on this weight loss program a year prior that has some soy, not a ton of soy, but some in there. And I had someone insinuate that I gave it to myself because of the
Mhm.
soy, and come to find out that was a bunch of bullshit. So, anyway,
I know.
um, but that early detection piece,
Mhm.
you, I am sure that you are hopefully pretty vocal to other people about the importance of not skipping your mammogram, making sure that you're taking care of your breast health, and making sure that you're listening to your body, because um, 1 in 8 women get breast cancer, and and women are getting younger. So I
Yeah.
would imagine you are helping to educate your daughters about this, because
Yeah.
and on top of that, did you say you had it in your family?
I have two first cousins that have
Okay.
breast cancer on both
Okay.
sides, but I was, they did the genetic testing on me, and I don't have BRCA or
Okay.
any of the mutations.
So that's the same for me. No one in my family that I know of had breast cancer. And they did the genetic test on me. Nothing came out for me. And then I found out that more people who don't have it in their family get breast cancer.
Yeah.
And so there's people out there who think, oh, well, I don't know, and I don't have it in my family, so I'm not going to get it. And that is just not the proper information. And people need to understand that if you are a woman or a man, you need to take care of your breast health. You need to be aware of any changes that are going on visually, and feeling your breasts and your armpits, and all of that, and just being aware and listening to your intuition and things like that. So early detection is where it's at, because you will be, it's going to suck. It doesn't, no matter
Yeah.
what way you look at it, it sucks to get breast
It's
cancer.
because you have to
Um,
get out.
But if it's caught early enough, it's a whole heck of a lot better, and your chances of survival are just so much better. Um, let's talk about the PAP flap. Not a lot of people. I haven't heard. You're the first person I've heard that has had the PAP flap. So, what was your experience? What is your experience? How are your healing? How's your healing going? And
It's
all of
going.
that.
Um, well, that's why I wrote to you, because I thought, you know, it's the second most popular form of autologous reconstruction after the DIEP. And I thought we should talk about it because there are women that aren't eligible for the DIEP flap for scar tissue, or they don't have enough tissue on their stomach, or whatever it is. And so the PAP is the second donor site. So when I realized that I wanted to do the reconstruction, that I didn't want to have an implant, I, that's really the only choice that I had, to do the PAP. And, my doctor showed me pictures of patients that he had and blah, 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 blah. And I went online and I did research, but I hadn't talked to anyone that had ever had a PAP flap. Everyone had the DIEP flap. The people that I knew, or I heard from so and so's cousins, mothers, sisters, had the DIEP flap. So I kind of, I kind of knew what to expect, but I kind of went in cold, and I knew that I wasn't going to change my mind, right? Like I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And so anyway, I didn't realize I didn't realize all the nitty gritty stuff, but I'm glad I didn't, because as I said, I didn't want to change my mind. I didn't want anything to sort of cloud my kind of determination. So it was a 6-hour surgery. They took 2 doctors to work at the same time. They cut open my inner thigh, like very close to the groin area, like your bikini line. And they take the skin and the fat and the tissue from that area, and then they put it into my breast. So I already had the nipple sparing mastectomy. So I guess they just have to kind of put it in there and reattach all the blood vessels and, the nerves and this and that, and then sew me up down here, sew me up here. I was in the hospital for 3 nights and 4 days. I did have a blood transfusion the second day. My hemoglobin levels dropped. So that was really the only complication, if you could call it that. They say, you have the Doppler on your breast to make sure that this, the tissue is doing what it's supposed to do, the nerves and the cells and whatnot. I felt, I had the drains. I had 2 drains coming out of my breast, 1 coming out of my thigh. I had that big vacuum suction thing right there. It was pleasant. Great nurses, I have to say. I was actually happy that I was in the hospital. I know it sounds crazy, but they were emptying the drains and taking care of everything. When I had my mastectomy, it was a same day procedure. So they sent me home with the drains. I mean, my husband and I were like, what the hell? It was worse. It's almost like when we had our first child and they're like,
Yep.
here you go. And you're like,
Bye-bye.
see ya. Yeah, so that was, that learning curve and cleaning out drains. And honestly, even though I had 4 kids, I was not that mom that was into first aid or anything. I mean, I wasn't. I was like,
It's really interesting. I would love to know, number one, the hospital that you got your surgery and your doctors' names. Who were your doctors?
So I had the surgery at Valley Hospital in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and my doctors were Dr. Breslow and Dr. Greeny. They were the
And
two.
were they both, they're both
They're
microsurgeons
microsurgeons, and they're
and they
plastic.
work as a team.
They work as a team,
Love that.
and they work with my breast surgeon. So she was the one that recommended them.
Love
And
that. You really lucked out.
I lucked out.
You really did. Yeah. Because there are a lot of situations where that is not the case, where the breast surgeon is working with or at least recommending different kinds of surgery. So where I live, there's no one that I know who does the autologous surgeries here. I think there's one doctor who has something on his menu, but he's not one to do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things, and nor is he a microsurgeon. So um, to find a plastic microsurgeon in our country is really one of my missions. I'm trying to uncover where all the good ones are, um, because I want people to know where their options are. Like for me, I went to New Orleans just because that was recommended to me. And then I've been very successful on uncovering where other ones are, like a Dr. Elizabeth Potter, Dr. Garza, Dr. Crisopolo, Dr. Gassman. Um, and Dr. Srinivasa, so in LA. So I want people to know geographically where all these great surgeons are, so that they know that they don't have to travel too far away if some are closer to them. But on the other hand, I also want people to know what their options are as far as what their philosophies are. Do they work as a team? Do they not work as a team? Do they take your insurance? Do they do deep flap? Do they do pat flap? Do they, you know what I mean? Stack
Yeah.
flap. And so because when we're interviewing surgeons, it's really important to know the questions to ask, which is one of the reasons, I started a nonprofit and I'm waiting for the status. I'm super excited about that. And I'm website is being built under testtosebreasts.org, where I'm going to be housing a lot of free resources for breast cancer patients and people who've never been diagnosed, so that they know, um, you know, what questions to ask surgeons, what these terms mean with insurance. If you get denied, how do you appeal, and things like that. So that's why I wanted to ask where you went and who your surgeons were. And also, I love the fact that they kept you in the hospital for a few nights, because I don't understand. I literally do not understand. Well, I do. I think it has everything to do with money. How people can do these kinds of surgeries and literally send them home that same day. It's really hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
And when I went to New Orleans, I was in the hospital for 3 nights for that first
Your first,
phase. And
yeah,
then for phase 2, I was in the hospital for 1 night. But if I needed to stay another night,
you could.
I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kudos to them for having you in that hospital, because it is a lot. You have drains, and and they're teaching your caregiver to how to drain, so that when you go home,
Right.
they know how to do it. So it's a lot.
And
It's a
that
lot.
doctor, I mean, that whole
Hmm.
the oxygen, and I mean, they told me, they said, you are going to take it up front. Like this is a big surgery.
Hmm.
Um, it's complicated. It's much more complicated than the mastectomy. I mean, you're just taking something off. Um, but the upside is that once you heal, it's all you.
Yes.
It's no more swapping out the implants or any sort of issues. And that's what appealed to me. I thought, you know what? I got through the mastectomy. which incidentally it's like a walk in the park compared
Mhm.
to the DIEP flap. I'm not gonna lie. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's no joke. Yeah,
so-
those surgeries, no matter how you look at it, it's no joke. But I will say that your breasts probably feel nice and natural. I mean, you do lose sensation. There are some people like
warm.
Dr. Crisopolo. He does the sensation sparing, and it works differently on all kinds of people. But you do lose some feeling, but they're natural. Um, they're not like hard.
No,
They're nice and
it's
natural.
like it's getting warm. Like it's warm.
It's a warm breast. Yes.
Like I touch my boob all the time
Yeah,
now.
me too. I know. And you probably flash everyone if they
So
ask, yeah,
people,
I'll show you, no problem.
see my breast.
Yeah, when I was younger, my friends, I was kind of an edgy gal when I was younger, and I was kind of a flasher. And I look back and like, what were you thinking? But it was just who I was. And I had little breasts, and but now it's kind of funny because I'll look at them and say, "Did you want to?" I mean, men I don't do, but
you know,
did you want to see them? We're like, "Yeah, I want to see them." Like, you
Like,
know, um,
that's a way of educating people too. Like like with the expander, when they put the expander in, I could show them like, oh, this is where it's sticking out, blah blah blah. You can touch it. People are like, can I touch it? Or, but that's education too. Like
mhm.
showing people like
Yes.
this is what happens. Like, you have to get the cancer out of your body. And
Mhm.
there's no easy way of doing this. There's no easy way. And
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I also do not love it when people say, "Oh, you got a nice boob job." It's like, no,
no,
this was not a boob job. This was not. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I wouldn't want to do this. But
no,
it's nice to know that there are surgeons out there who, are compassionate, and they understand that you just went through something
trim-
crazy,
yeah.
traumatic, and we need to figure out a way to rebuild and make that person whole again,
Mhm.
um, and feel good about themselves. And the extra added bonus to it is like for me with the DIEP flap, they were able to, kind of give me a little tummy tuck. And not that I really needed it. I didn't have enough tissue for my surgery. So Dr. Cabling actually did have to take a hybrid implant, and he sort of had to talk me through off the ledge on that one, because
Right.
I was like, wait a minute, no. And he says, hear me out. He says you're not going to need to, switch them out like all the time or anything like that. But he says it's going to be so far behind your muscle that you're never even going to know it's there. And what it's going to do is it's going to provide that little projection, because I ended up deciding to do both. And I only needed to do one, but I ended up doing both. Um, so he said that will provide that little projection. And he's right. I don't even know they're there. I don't feel them. They're all natural. I've got, that surgery, they connect all your veins. It's a big surgery. So, but I feel whole. Like I feel good. I feel good in my skin.
Yeah.
Um, and that is what we want for people. We don't talk about this like, oh my God, it was so cool. I got breast cancer and then I got to have a boob job and a tummy tuck. That is just so different, than if we just made the decision to do that without breast cancer.
Well,
Um,
like I wouldn't. I mean,
no.
I think the downside of breast cancer being so common is that people tend to minimize it. And
Yes.
I think that that was kind of the biggest shock
Mhm.
that I lived through.
Yeah.
And just some of the things that people say.
Yeah.
And, I don't like to dwell on hurt feelings, but I was really like hurt and kind of surprised by certain people, like just comments. And I
Yeah.
think because I was in such a vulnerable spot, um, it just, it kind of seared into my brain. It and I do think that unless you're going through something, you don't really understand what the person is going through. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
you don't know until you know. It's just,
yes, yeah,
Jennifer, that's a really interesting thing that you brought up. I've had these conversations with people on this podcast before, and I think that for people who are listening to this podcast, and maybe people who know you, it's not that we want to make people feel bad, because I know that before I got breast cancer, or before my mom died and other friends' moms died, I probably said things that were not real helpful. And mainly because in our society, we have all these cliche things to say, like, oh my God, you're so strong.
yes,
Wow, I could never go through, like, I would never be able to do with what you're doing right now.
like,
And I'm and you kind of think about it, it's like, huh, so if you got breast cancer, you wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. That just sounds so weird, right? Because
right,
what's the alternative? So um so we do learn a lot about what we may have said in the past
totally,
based on what people have said to us. And like, I had people say things like, um, but Jamie, you were so healthy. Like, what happened? It's like, oh my God, I gave myself breast cancer.
yeah,
And that really confused me, because I am healthy. And apparently healthy people can get breast cancer.
hmm,
Go figure.
yeah,
So people, I think people in general are, they mean well. I think that they do, and I think that's where we find the strength to just understand. We
yes,
understand what they're saying, and we understand that they mean well. We also learn a lot about what we can say to people when they get breast cancer, or when their mom dies, or their dad dies, or
yeah,
whatever. Um, and I think people like to talk. I think people get uncomfortable, um, and they don't know really what to say, so they say something that might not be helpful. And I always tell people, if you don't know what to say, just be flat out honest. Jennifer, I am so sorry you're going through this. That this totally sucks. I don't even know what to say. I'm just really sorry, and I'm thinking about you. And that is not saying anything, that's hurtful or anything. You're just thinking about you. I wish I knew what to say.
well, I found when I reached out to people, my form of doing research, a lot of it was just calling people that I knew. I called my two cousins. We talked about breast cancer, anyone that I knew that had breast cancer, was going through it, whatever, I got in touch with. And I thought the first thing that a breast cancer survivor says is, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And it wasn't like, oh, you're so lucky. It's only stage one. This, or you're a fighter, or it's only breast cancer. Like everyone.
Oh, you got the good kind of cancer.
Yeah, that's a good kind. That's awesome. You think you'll stop drinking wine now? Like, um, I know, not. You get a boob job. Now you get a boob job. It's like,
I had three people say, oh, well, you get to have your 20-year-old boobs again. I'm like, I don't want my 20-year-old boobs.
I don't want a boob job. If I wanted a boob job, I would have gotten a boob job. Like seriously. But, you know,
I
I
know. It's pretty interesting. And that this is why it's important for us to talk about this on this podcast, because people need to know. And it's
yeah,
not, again, not to make people feel bad. It's that this is a learning opportunity
mm,
for people to understand what kind of things are probably not helpful.
mm,
And so thank you for sharing that. I think that's, so common with breast cancer survivors to talk about that. Um, I want to ask you to what would you, I want to phrase this in a way that putting you back in the spot where you were just diagnosed, what would you tell yourself, your newly diagnosed self, given where you are now today?
Take your time. I think, the feeling that you have to rush and you have to make all these decisions, because you do have to make a lot of decisions. Secondly, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but keep your trust group, your circle of trust small. I feel like I probably overshared my diagnosis, and then I got a lot of opinions that weren't really helpful, and were like, I thought to myself, no, if I had to go back, I would tell myself, your circle of trust, keep it small, take your time, and you'll be okay. You'll get through this. But it was, it was shocking, and I think it took me a while to get out of that shock. And I think it was really easy for myself too to minimize what I was going through. Like, I'm fine. I wasn't fine. I was like walking around and like, and I think I would tell myself I wouldn't be so hard on myself. I think that's, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for finding the doctors that I did. I'm grateful for my family. My husband was so supportive. He still is. I was around a lot of support. So my children were wonderful, my daughters, my son, you know, but I think, I would tell myself that, what I'm going through is a big deal, and it's okay to take your time to make up your mind how you want to deal with this, because only me was going to go through it, right? Nobody else. It's I'm the one going in that operating room, no one else is. So
Yeah. It is a big deal, Jennifer. It's a big deal. And I think that our audience, people who have never had breast cancer, I think our audience needs to know that it is a big deal, and it is not the good kind of cancer. And it's not, I mean, we lose a lot. I mean, I lost my hair, then it came back. It's short now, but we lose our breasts. A lot of us do. You really go through some emotions that we've never felt before, and I love your advice to yourself. I was an oversharer too. And I'm just a very open person in that way. I put it out there on Facebook. And I remember before I went in to get my port installed, my my surgeon had to kind of talk me off the ledge a bit, because the night before is when I had someone reach out to me and tell me, oh, hey, I had my sister had a friend of a friend who did this weight loss program. I did Optavia, and it was really good for me. It worked for me very well, and I was very healthy and all that. She said, and then she lost a bunch of weight, and then she got a really aggressive breast cancer. That stuff has a lot of soy in it. Just wanted to tell you. And this was like at 10:30 at night, the night before my PET scan and my port install, and that really threw me over the edge. And then I had someone tell me that, oh God, please don't do chemo. It's going to screw your life up. It's going to screw your body up. Please don't do chemo. And so before my surgery the next day, when I got the port, my surgeon had to put it off for about 20 minutes to really talk me up the ledge. And she said, look, she says, when we get diagnoses like this, and when you put it out there into the public, you're going to have to filter a lot of things out. Some people just go into monk mode and they just keep it real quiet. But we have to understand that people will say things to you that are not going to feel good, and we have to filter those. So that was really helpful to me.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that she told me that, and I was able to move forward after that. So I think that no matter how we choose to share or not share or whatever, that's our own personal journey. And um, I think that it's really important to look at what you would tell yourself as the newly diagnosed of where you are now, because we know we come through this and there's some
Yeah.
silver linings. I mean, like, look at this, like, we have a new friendship. There are friends that I have met from all over the country and outside of our country who we are friends. Like, we connect with each other on the podcast, we text each other, we call each other, we FaceTime. I have three friends of mine that I'm in touch with all the time. We're going to San Antonio in May to get our nipple tattoos from Perky. And
Uh-huh.
I've never met two of them in person. One I've met at the hospital in December, finally in person, but I've known these girls for over a year.
Right, right.
And so the friendships that come out of it, it's the sisterhood of all sisterhoods, right?
That it is.
So I want to wrap up a little bit here. I just really appreciate your sharing such deep messages with our audience today. I do want to ask you this really important question. What kind of big piece of advice would you give to someone who has never been diagnosed?
Well, obviously, I mean, keep up with your mammograms. But I think who's never been diagnosed?
Never been diagnosed. I mean, you know how you felt before you got breast cancer. You thought, that's what happens to other people.
Yeah.
I took care of myself. I breastfed my kids.
Right,
I'm
right.
safe,
I'm
right?
doing everything right, you
Mhm.
know. I don't know. I mean, things happen, things go wrong. I don't, I mean, I will say someone said this to me and I found it to be like, I would say, don't ever say this to anyone who's been diagnosed with breast cancer. I had someone say to me, every time I get my mammogram back and it comes back clear, I consider myself so blessed. I mean, I was like, well, am I cursed then? Like what? Like, why would you say that to anybody? So I think I don't want to be like, you're going to get breast cancer or, that nagging, like some, 1 in 8. But I do think that, I think we have to prepare ourselves that if it's not you, it could be your sister, your mother, your daughter, your best friend, your neighbor. It's going to be someone, right? It's going to be someone. I mean, I just found out last week that another cousin of mine was just diagnosed with breast cancer. We're in that age. I mean, I'm 57 years old, this is when it happens. So,
Well, and actually, I've interviewed quite a few people who had it when they were in their early 30s.
yeah,
So and it's interesting. Statistics are showing that women are younger and younger now. So when I was in my 30s, it wasn't even on my radar.
right,
Um, and I want for 20-year-olds in their 20s and 30s to have it on their radar.
right. Well, I
With
know.
the statistics that we have, we need to have it on their radar. And you know, education, knowledge is power.
Yep. And I do think, I mean, was it my one of my doctors said to me, your daughters will probably have to start with their baseline at 35. So, so I think with having more, having more breast cancer in a family, I think makes you more attuned
Mm-hmm.
to what you need to do to keep yourself, just so that, to keep yourself, just so you can catch it early if it does happen.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, and just being really in tune with their breasts, feeling their breasts,
yeah.
and and looking in the mirror and noticing if anything's different. If they feel something over on the left side, feel yourself over on the right side in the same area to see if there's something there as well. And there's lots of YouTube videos that people can watch.
You know what? I had, and I didn't realize this until after I was diagnosed, but I had these like little zingers, like in
Mhm,
my right breast. Every
mhm,
now, like I'd be lying down, and it felt like sort of like an electrical current. I was like, this
mhm,
is weird, but
mhm,
I never put that together
mhm.
because I didn't feel any lumps or anything.
So
Uh,
that's when I asked you the question, did you, before, how did that come about? Like, did you feel anything? So for me, I felt a lump, but I had lumpy breasts because they were dense breast tissue. And by the way, the younger you are, they have dense breasts, and as we get older, the less dense they get.
mhm.
But I felt a lump, and I knew that it felt different. Um, but I sort of ignored it because I was so excited to retire. I was just going about my days, just like, so excited. And I'd be like, okay. And then I did feel those zingers, and I'd be like, huh, what's that?
Yeah,
And so if you're feeling those things, don't just ignore those things.
right.
Don't ignore those things. That's why I'm like, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell yourself before you were diagnosed? Don't ignore those things.
Yeah, don't ignore the
Don't.
zinger. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
did not know that that was a sign
Hmm.
or like I knew, everyone knows lumps, and it wasn't until after that I kind of put it together like,
Hmm.
oh,
Yep. And
nothing,
this
anything
And
in the,
this is why we talk about these things on this podcast. Test those breasts, test those breasts, test those breasts. and and talk to people that know. You don't need to talk to people that don't know.
yep.
Talk to people that know. There's a huge, huge, huge community out there that we can learn from. And I'm just glad that Test Those Breasts is part of that community. You're part of that community. I'm just glad that we're there so that we can help educate people. So I just really appreciate so much your coming on this show and sharing your story and what you went through, how you're feeling about it now. What are you planning, or if you're planning to do um, going forward to help educate other people, bring awareness?
Well, I think, so many people know now that I have breast cancer in my, everyone that I work with in my world. And I think just talking about it and taking the mystery out of it, I think that's really where I can see myself. Um, I found, I'm in this local Facebook group, people reach out. I mean, I feel like you're right. Like we just can talk to each other, give each other
Mhm.
advice. What did you do when this happened? Yada, yada, yada. I mean, I think that that's where I can see myself almost, just being a source of information and
I love that. And now you're on this podcast, which is going to be out there in the universe, and people are going to listen to your story and learn something. I learn something from every guest that I interview, and I just find that very healing for me. I started this as a healing mechanism because I felt like if I could help even one person, that would be good for my heart. And now it's grown, into almost 50 episodes so far. And I just and then now it's going to be a nonprofit, and I'm just going to keep on going forward. And I'm just grateful for people like you that are willing to share your story and that have found the podcast to be helpful. You have your email address if anybody wants to reach out. If you want me to put that on the show notes, or and your
My
Facebook page and your Instagram.
Instagram. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to put that in there. And do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
Well, thank you. As I said.
Oh, you got some.
Oh, it's fire. Maybe it's a fire.
Maybe a fire.
Yeah. It's a nice day today, so I opened up some of the windows.
Nice. It's a nice day here in Reno as well. Well, I thank you too. And I just am glad that we're breast cancer friends. And of course, we would never have met each other had we not had breast cancer. So I consider that to be a major silver lining.
Right.
And so thank you, Jennifer.
You're
And
welcome.
to my guests, I just appreciate your joining me again. And I hope that you can go on and rate this show and whatever platform you're listening on, and leave a review if you can on the platforms that allow you to do that. And we will see you next time on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now.